Hello art friends and welcome back to my channel. In this video I'm going over these three products and how you can use them to add texture to your paintings or mixed media projects. So I have a piece of acrylic paper here for acrylic painting, and I separated it into the molding paste, the Tar Gel, and the Crackle medium. And I'm going to put all three of these on here, let them dry, and then we'll test them out. So let's start with the molding paste. And this looks a lot like drywall paste or spackle paste if you've ever done any home repairs. And there are artists that actually do use that. And I generally use a palette knife and just put it on. Sometimes if I'm doing a landscape, I'll try to shape it a little bit in landscape forms. If you dab with it, it gives you these little peaks that adds like a little bit more texture. So I'll do that up here. And I'll just add a little bit more here on the bottom, just so we have a good coating. And then for the clear tar gel, this looks more like melted glue, or if you've used a glue gun, it may be very similar to the stuff they use in the glue gun sticks. And I just generally use a stick, or this is like a coffee stir stick, and just dip it in there and just randomly let it drizzle on my canvas or paper. Now you certainly could do this a little bit more controlled. And down here I'll just kind of spread it out a little bit so there's like a big area of it so that we can see what that looks like. The thing I like about this is it's very random and organic when you just kind of let it flow on. All right, and so then let's put on the crackle paste. Now these are all golden products. There may be some other brands out there that have similar products. I just happen to have the golden ones. And this looks, again, very similar to like a plaster or joint compound kind of thing. It's a little bit whiter, so it dries a little bit lighter than the molding paste, I guess. I keep calling it modeling paste. It's molding. I think it's called molding paste. Now with the crackle medium, you want to actually try to put this on fairly even. Like you don't want big areas of peaks and valleys. You want it fairly smooth. So at the top I did it a little bit thicker because sometimes when you do it thicker you get bigger crackles and smaller crackles at the bottom. So now we just need to let that dry. Okay, so now the texture stuff that I put on there has dried. And again, the middle one was the clear tar gel. The crackle paste was over here. And this one was molding paste. So what I'm going to do is I have some acrylic paint. This is Cactus green. And I have some acrylic ink. And I probably should have made these bigger, but I'm going to try to do half with paint and half with ink just so you can see the difference when you apply paint or ink to this texture and the differences that you get. So let's start with the paint. And I'm going to just water it down just a little bit. So you'll see if you paint over the modeling paste and you don't have it really, really wet where the paint's going to seep down in there, you definitely are going to get the texture of the dried modeling paste. And I don't know if I can get these so you can see it, but the tar gel dries clear and shiny. The rest of these dry flat, and you can see the crackle in the crackle paste. See how it's creating those little crackle. Now, the thicker you put it on, the bigger the crackle is supposed to be. But since this is such a small area, I didn't really have room to do. I tried to do it a little bit less on the bottom, but that didn't work. So the tar gel is interesting. It kind of acts as a resist a little bit. So you can paint it, but then you can also come back in and pull off the paint from the actual gel that you put on there. So this is fun for making, you know, just sort of random swirly patterns. I did a series where I used this and I created a whole bunch. I just sort of let it drizzle onto the canvas and I made a bunch of spirally swirls. So it's kind of fun. It is shiny though, so that's the only downside. And then the crackle paste, again, I'm going to add just a little bit of water to the paint so that you can see the effect. Because what you almost have to do with the crackle paste is use something a little bit more liquidy so it goes down into the crackle part of it. So I can put that on, and then again, I can kind of pull off some of the stuff on the top, just sort of lightly. And you'll see that the color settles down into the cracks of where it has crackled. So that's an interesting effect too. All right, let's try the acrylic ink. And I think what I'm going to do is just do a quick light spray over all of these. So here it is on the modeling paste. And I find with this, you don't see the texture as much. But what you can do is put it on there. And actually, I have so much on my brush. I'm just going to go ahead and put it on the other areas. And then again here, if you come back and sort of wipe off or blot off the color, it goes in the cracks. I could have probably let that sit a little bit longer. So I generally, especially with the inks, because they are so fluid, do come back and pull some of the ink off to kind of reveal that texture. And you can see with the darker colors, the tar gel is going to be much more, like you can get it all the way back to white. So this is almost like using masking fluid with watercolor, except that you can't remove this. This probably could have been a little bit darker in some of the areas, so you can come back and just sort of put it on there, let it go. So it can be a little bit darker. Maybe let's add a second color. Now I actually did a couple of seascape paintings where I used the crackle medium, and I will show you those at the end of this video. But it does give you some, not only some interesting texture, but it allows the colors to blend a little bit. And you'll see, you know, you can get that really clean. So depending on the look you're going for. And then with the modeling paste, again, it just, the texture, because it's got some texture that sticks up, it just gives you a little bit of visual variation. But it's not quite as prominent as the other two. And you can see now as this dries, the paint has settled in a little bit more. So these are interesting ways to make textures, and I have used them all in paintings before. And they're just fun to play with. Now this is just acrylic paper that I did this test on, but you can definitely do this on canvas. So let me show you the couple that I did as finished paintings using some of these techniques. Okay, so here's a painting called Sea Jewels. This is number 2, so I did 2 of these. You'll see here at the bottom, to create that sand area, I used the crackle medium. And then I also put, if you notice, some mica flecks on there to add a little bit of visual texture. I also used, if you can see up here, a little bit of the modeling paste just to create a little bit of texture in where these waves are. So I did a couple of seascapes where I used this technique with the crackle medium and the texturing there. So this is a small 8x8 mixed media piece that I used the tar gel on. And I did a whole series called the Scribble series where I did this same effect on sort of different sizes. But again, you can see the tar gel just sort of gives some relief on the top of this. Now I came back and painted over this instead of wiping it clear because I didn't necessarily want it clear. But that's also another texture that you can do that just creates some visual interest. And this was just drizzled on with a stick or in one of those coffee stir sticks or the back of my paintbrush or something. And it could be spattered as well. And you just let it dry and then you can paint over it or you can wipe the paint off and leave it that way as well. I also have this landscape that I did. It also has some of the modeling paste on it. I don't know if you can see, it's hard to see on camera. There is a spot here that's got some texture on it. And then on this, I actually had some white rice that I glued on there. So you can also make texture with things like sand and rice and little beads and, you know, anything that you can basically glue on there and that will stay glued. Now this is on canvas, and I also use metallic. So this one is called Copper Hills because of the copper metallic I put in there. So that's just a couple of ways that I've used texture to create finished paintings and giving it a little bit more visual interest. But I encourage you to just play and see what you can come up with for uses of these particular textures. And you'll see the crackle medium here isn't quite as pronounced. Probably because on the one that I did, I probably did multiple layers of ink on there. But it definitely gives an interesting texture. And then here was the tar gel. Again, it creates something shiny. So if you're painting with flat paints and you want an area to stand out, you know, maybe you have some shiny water or something, that could be an interesting technique. And then the modeling paste just creates some relief on there. And it's really hard to see on camera, but you can definitely see it when you look at this up close. You can see the texture there. So that's 3 more ways that you can add texture to your mixed media paintings. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video and you give these techniques a try.